welcome everybody. There's just a couple more people coming in. Thank you all for putting aside for our special program. You're going to be very, very satisfied with our talk from Rabbi Aiello and then also from our member Angele. And it's a gorgeous day. So without further ado, we can go ahead. We can just say welcome again, Rabbi, and thank you so much for coming back to our organization.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Shalom, benvenuti, and welcome. And of course, it's evening here in Calabria, so buonasera. I'm honored and delighted to bring the Jews of southern Italy to all of you. Now, have you been to Italy? I know many of you have. You're shaking your heads and raising your hands. But if you have not yet been to Italy, no worries, because all of us know something really special about Italy, and that is that Italy is shaped like a... Here we go. Yes, indeed. Here's my boot. And I always like to bring my boot because it's three-dimensional, but it allows me to show you a little bit about where I am. I'm in Calabria, and I'm the red dot right here. I'll put a little closer. And up here is Naples in the black, and we go a little further up, it's Rome, and all the way up here probably to Florence. But all of these little white, all of my little white push pins represent Giudecca, represent little paesini, little villages where we have found remnants of Jewish tradition in over 200, actually in 204 little villages. We found vestiges, I should say, of Jewish heritage. As I said, I am located in the toe of the boot, and we know from our area here that Italian Jewish families date back thousands of years to the time of the Maccabees, when Jews left Judea and they voluntarily came to Italy, and we became the world's very first diaspora Jews. And centuries later, at the time of the expulsion from Spain, the violent Inquisition that followed, Jews left Spain and they settled on the islands of Sicily and Sardinia, as well as the Aeolian island chain, and then to the toe and the foot of the boot in Calabria, where I'm speaking to you from today. These Jews were running from persecution and from forced conversion. And there is a Hebrew word for this phenomenon, and I know many of you know it. It is called anusim, and it literally means the forced ones. We are B'nai Anusim, the descendants or the children of the forced ones. And so we ask ourselves, forced? How? Well, in Spain, beginning in 1492, Jews were forced to do one of two things: to convert to Christianity or to leave the country. Those who converted, many from my own ancestors, were called marranos, which of course is an insulting term meaning pig. Others took their practices underground, like my father's ancestors did. They practiced in secret, and they were known as crypto Jews. Many of these crypto or secret Jewish families were desperate to cling to a remnant of their Jewish traditions. But how could they do that and not be found out? How could they avoid harassment and persecution and physical danger to themselves and to their families? Well, they did it by hiding in plain sight. So I want you to come with me, and together we will investigate the Calabrian mountain towns, along with my own little village, which is called Serrastretta, to see with our own eyes the remarkable things that my Jewish ancestors did to keep their traditions alive, to demonstrate in a subtle but definitive way there is a Jewish presence here. So let's look at photo one as we're ready to go. Full disclosure, that is not my Vespa. That is my cousin's Vespa, and I sat on it for the photo opportunity. But I love the picture because if you look behind me, you can see the mountains and the lush greenery and the isolation of this town, which was one of the reasons why the 5 Jewish families that settled here, why they chose this particular area. But we are going to go down the mountain to the village of Nicastro, to the old city center that was the heartbeat of Jewish life. And let's look at photo 2. This is the castle, if you see the ruins there, the castle of King Frederick II. Now, who was he? He was a benevolent monarch who appreciated the economic prosperity that the Jews of Nicastro offered the region. King Frederick ruled over southern Italy during the 1200s, and it was a time that our bubbies would say was good for the Jews. Now, if you'll notice, not only the castle, but notice the houses, and this is all the people who live here today understand that their ancestors were once Jewish, and you can see the houses hanging off the side of the hill, and how the castle did indeed offer protection for this little neighborhood that was located right below it. In fact, the old Jewish quarter that you're looking at right there was called Timpone, meaning ridge in Italian. It exists today with an impressive plaque that honors their memory. And let's take a look at that plaque on photo 3. There we go. Now the plaque reads, "In il Timpone di Giudecca," the ridge of Judaism, of the Jews. In this quarter, there worked an industrious group of Jews, and just beyond the plaque, there is an archway that leads to the synagogue that centuries later was confiscated by Inquisition authorities to become a Catholic church. And let's take a look at the church. There we go. This had been a synagogue. During the Inquisition, when synagogues were closed and transformed into churches, and as I said, this was one of them, it was customary to allow a remnant of Jewish tradition to remain. Now, why would they do that? Most likely superstition, fear, knowing that they had stolen the synagogue. It was thought that leaving a bit of Judaism behind might absolve them of their feelings of guilt. And can you see what was left? Take a look. It is the remnant of the Magen David, of the Star of David, and it remained not only on the original synagogue of Nicastro, which you're looking at right now, but the truncated star became an architectural symbol and is found on buildings that once were synagogues, and you can see this all throughout Calabria and Sicily. But sadly, the Jews were driven out. Well, why? Well, the long arm of the Inquisition reached from Spain into Portugal, to Sicily, to the Italian mainland, and to Timpone, the area we've just discovered. But what was it really, really like? And let's hear exactly what happened. And I'm going to ask you to bring me onto the big screen. Grazie a Dio. Baruch di, now I can talk to you. Per favore, scusami for my appearance. I left in great haste, and I did not have time to find another covering, so I continue to use this, the blue scarf that we Jewish women of the South were forced to wear when we ventured out from Timpone, out of the old Jewish quarter of Nicastro. Blue, bruta, awful. How I hate it. It is the color that the prostitutes must wear. And then, when the persecution began, we Jewish women were demeaned and made to wear that color, this color of disgrace. Male. Bad. How bad, how bad has it become for us Jews of the South? I will tell you how bad. After many, many years of tranquilita, when we Jews were respected for our lending of money, for our honest dealings with our neighbors, Jews and Christians both they were, do you know what the bishop did? He stopped our work. Last year in 1623 in Nicastro, my home, and in the nearby towns of Catanzaro and even Tropea on the coast, the whole south was devastated by la terremote, earthquakes, so bad that rocks big like this covered the land. The people, they lost so much. They came to us, the Jews, for help to begin again. Of course they come to us. We Jews, we were the money lenders, and we took our responsibility to the community very seriously. Come, we said, we will lend you the money you need to buy seeds, the money you need to buy plants. Our rates were low, we helped everyone, we turned no one away. But then come the authorities. They create a new società, a new group to lend the money, charging their suffering neighbors double, triple the rate of interest. Then, what do? They force the Jews to stop their work as bankers to the poor. They force us to flee. But as we were leaving our beloved Timpone, our Jewish quarter, where we never once were locked inside the gate, we are required to wear the hated blue for the women and the orange patch, the rotella, for the men. Tui. Our Christian neighbors, they cried out to us, tears falling from their eyes. Ibrei, non lasciarci. Jews, don't leave us. Help us now as you helped us before. How I wanted to stay, but we knew we could not. Now, after so many years of good, so many years of il bene, now in the South it was bad. It was so bad for the Jews. So what happened next? The Jews traveled north to find safety and security in the mountains. They looked for an isolated area where they could create a hidden Jewish community, first in the village called Scigliano, and then in the village of my ancestors, the village of Serrastretta. What evidence of a hidden Jewish presence do we find? We begin in the most unlikely of places, the parish church, and here we are at the church door. Let's look at photo 5. There we are. That is the church door. Isn't it magnificent? It is just magnificent. But we're going to study the massive metal doors because they are huge and stately with intricate panels that depict what? Not Christian scenes, but scenes that show the life of the village. And let's look at photo 6. We'll get a close-up of one of these panels. Yes, there we go. Here we see a panel that highlights the making of chairs, a craft that was brought from Spain and still practiced today. Other panels show a weeping family about to immigrate to parts unknown, while other panels feature folk dancing and the Jewish women weavers who were creating cloth from the Ginestra plant, which we know in English is called broom. All created by local artists who featured not one religious scene, but crafts that the Jews who settled the town brought with them all the way from Spain. And now let's go inside the church on photo 7. Here we are inside the church. We are in the middle of the sanctuary looking up. expecting to see a Christian depiction. Jesus, Mary, saints? No. Directly above the heads of the faithful, we see Moses and the Ten Commandments. And surrounding him are a number of the prophets. Calabrian artists whose families were once Jewish created this fresco as a way to say, Jewish traditions are here. They are not lost. Later on, when Jewish families felt more secure, they decorated the cortile, the courtyard in front of their homes, with this. Let's look at photo 8. You see my cats there? There's 4 of the 7. 4 of the 7 are there. I've lived in this village for 17 years, and hardly a month goes by without a local approaching me. Rabina, they say, come look. We are working at restoring an abandoned house. Come and look at what we found. And yes, workers have uncovered yet another Star of David, another Magen David, often hidden underneath ceramic tile, wooden boards, concrete, or even astroturf. Strong evidence that Serrastretta's Jewish presence at one point had been everywhere. As was the case in dozens of villages throughout these mountains, the Inquisition authorities were relentless. They pursued the Jews, and eventually they found us, taking our synagogues and transforming them into churches. The synagogue here in Serrastretta suffered the same fate. And let's look at photo 9, the ruins of the original synagogue. And we're looking at the 2 remaining walls of what was our original synagogue, active 500 years ago. The structure crumbled during the earthquake of 1908, but those 2 walls remain. And now the town is working to gather the funds to restore the building as an interfaith cultural center that will feature a Judaica library and exhibits depicting the history of Calabrian Jewish life. And let's look at photo 10. That's me when I was a little girl. I was very fortunate, as I was telling some of you earlier. I grew up in America. I'm the first person in my family born in the United States. My family settled in Pittsburgh, and as a youngster, people would ask me my name. And I would say, of course, Barbara Aiello. And then if religion came up and I told them about my background, the synagogue that my father sometimes took me to, the things we did at home, some people would look at me in disbelief and say something that I have heard all my life. But you can't be Jewish. You're Italian. Later on, as I became a Jewish, some of you have heard it too, right? Later on, as I became a Jewish professional and later a rabbi, the same things continued to happen. And it often would go like this. Aiello, isn't that an Italian name? Yes, it is. So that's your married name. No, that's my own name. That's the name I was born with. Oh, now I understand. You're a convert. No, actually, I was born Jewish. But your parents, they had a mixed marriage. Your father was the Italian and your mother was Jewish. No, both my parents were Jewish. Oh, really? Well, what was your mother's name? Elena Siciliano. But that's Italian. Well, yes, my mother was from Sicily and my father was from Calabria. Their names were Siciliano and Aiello. But those are Italian names. You can't be Jewish. Ave. I have some surnames to show you, so it's not just Aiello that we're talking about. Let's look at photo number 11 and see if you recognize any of these. These are surnames that have a rich Jewish history. Spagnolo, Vita, Bonanno, Sacco or Zacco, Catalano, Romano, Defazio or Defazio, Sacerdoti, Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, and Ferranti, and the last one, Aiutami Cristo. Anybody, does anybody see a name on the list that they would like to know its Jewish background? And I'll ask Rose, if you see a hand up, maybe pick someone out for me.
I'd like an explanation for Aiutami Cristo.
I'm going to keep Aiutami Cristo to the last, okay? Okay, we'll get to you, okay? Anyone others there? I didn't hear.
Ferrari.
Oh, Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, Ferranti. These are variations of all of the same name. If you know anyone with that name goes all the way back to Spain, and it comes from the decorative wrought iron metalwork. That if you've been to Sicily and of course if you've been to Spain to some of the larger cities in Spain, I've also seen in Lisbon, the balconies especially are so decorative with beautiful wrought iron designs. This was a artigianato, a folk art of Jewish people, and their surname derived from that work. So you can see the Ferro, the third one in the list there, Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, meaning iron, and Ferrante. And anyone with that name goes all the way back to Spain as indicative of a Jewish craft. Is there another name we'd like to know something about? Okay, one at a time. Romano is some of the first Jews that were brought to Sicily were Roman slaves before the 1st century, and for the 1st century, I'm trying to think, 1st century AD, and CE. I'm sorry, CE. I couldn't think of it there for a moment, and when they were given their freedom, they needed a surname in order to be citizens, and they took on the name Romano. Is there another one there?
Fola.
Pardon me?
Fola. F-O-A.
Fola.
F-O-A.
I don't see it on my list here.
Sacerdote.
Oh, you all know sacerdote because it's one of the most common of all Jewish surnames, of course, among Ashkenazi Jews, who are the majority in North America. Sacerdote is Cohen.
Cohen, yeah.
Yes. Anyone else? We'll do one more, and then we'll get to Aiutami Cristo. We'll take one more.
Colosacco, is that also Jewish?
Yes, Sacco and Zacco are very interesting names because they come from zakat in Arabic or zadakah in Hebrew, and it means, of course, charitable giving. And Sacco is the southern Italian version. With the Z, the Zacco is Sicilian. Aiutami Cristo, help me Christ, a very, very interesting name. A young woman who's part of our congregation, it is her name. Her name is Patrizia Aiutami Cristo. And when she first called me, she said, I have always felt Jewish. My great-grandmother lived with us when I was a little girl, and there were many, many things that she did that were unusual. And as I got older and began to speak about it, people would tell me those are Jewish traditions. And I've always felt an affinity to the Jewish people. And I talk to Jews, and they would confirm that many of the things we were doing in our family had Jewish heritage. But then when they asked me my name and they heard Aiutami Cristo, they said, of course, you can't be Jewish with a name like that. And the interesting thing about it is that this is a converso amorano and anusim name, that when Jews were forced into Christian conversion, many times they took on a name that would indicate they were more Catholic than the Pope. In other words, they were so devoted to their newly adopted religion that they took on a name to keep the Inquisition authorities, the bureaucrats, at arm's length from them. And names such as Cristiana, meaning Christian woman, Spirito Santo, Holy Spirit, Di Dio, Son of God, Di Gesù, Gentile, all fall into the category of invented surnames adopted by Jews who were forced into Christian conversion. These Jews chose these surnames as a means of self-protection. If after their forced baptism into Christianity, they adopted a surname like Christiana, these Jews hoped to convince the Inquisition authorities that they had become super Christians, hoping that by adopting such an intensely Christian name, the Inquisition authorities might leave them in peace. This list is an important list because it represents only a tiny portion of the Italian surnames that have strong Jewish roots. There are hundreds more, names of Italians who had no knowledge of their Jewish history, as some of you were mentioning earlier when we were preparing for the lecture. But they were drawn to the Jewish tradition, many of whom married Jews. So if these are Jewish surnames, ancient Calabrian, Sicilian Jewish names, what happened to these Jews begs the question. How come there are no synagogues or Jewish schools, no cemeteries, libraries? How is it that so few Italian Americans know that centuries ago their families were Jewish? Well, for thousands of years, Jews practiced in secret. Who were these Jews and what did they do to keep the flame of Judaism burning in their souls? Well, my father of blessed memory was one of those, taught by his mother that the family had been secret Jews for centuries. When she came to the United States, she brought her Shabbat candelabra with her, and that is photo 12. Let's take a look at Nonna's candelabra, and you see the pavone there. What is the pavone in English? With the big feathers that come out like that. Peacock, thank you. And you see the branch with the fruit hanging, which is a melagrano, pomegranate as well. And it's interesting because there are many Italians, of course, here and also in the U.S. that have a 3-branch candelabra, and sometimes they are told you can't possibly be Jewish because to light a Shabbat candelabra, it's 2, not 3. But in the Mediterranean tradition here in southern Italy, the middle candle is used as a shamas to light the other 2. But this my grandmother brought with her from when my father brought her to the United States. When she was in Italy, my grandmother took this candelabra, her Shabbat candles, her challah, and her wine, and she would carry them downstairs into the cantina so many times that when she came to America, she did the same thing. Her very first Friday night in Pittsburgh, she gathered her Shabbat items and she headed downstairs, but my father stopped her at the cellar door and he said, "Mama, this is America. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave." And Nonna stopped him and said, "Non sono sicura, you never know." And she continued to light her Shabbat candles in the basement of the house in Beechview, Pennsylvania, for all of the rest of her life. And that's really an example of how Jewish practices survived. Jewish Italians had something so simple, something that served them so well. One of you said it earlier: testa dura, stubbornness, fortitude, good common sense. For example, if those who are persecuting us, if they want to believe that they pressured us into conversion, good. Let them think that. We know better. You take away our synagogue, we take the candles into our homes. You tell us we can't be Jews in the dining room, we'll take the candles into the basement. We can't have Rosh Hashanah for our new year, okay? We will blow a special horn on December 31st. In my book, I write about this hidden Jewish phenomenon, the story of the midnight shofar. For most of us, when we see a shofar, especially if we have an Ashkenazi background or our friends that do, this is the typical shape of the most common of the shofarot. But the Sephardic shofar, many of I'm sure you know, is different. Here it is. This is an Ashkenazi shofar. It is from an animal that is native to our southern Italian mountains. It is from the horn of a stambecco. And let's take a look at photo 13. Here's the animal that this shofar came from. So we just had the New Year not too long ago, and if you're very, very quiet in the mountains, right at midnight, you can hear all through the mountains. Grazia. All through the mountains of Calabria. When I followed this sound a number of years ago, I encountered my neighbor, Annibale. He explained that molto tempo fa, long ago, it was too dangerous to sound the shofar in the autumn at the time of Rosh Hashanah. But the desire to make the sound and to hear the sound, and we know that is the mitzvah, to make the sound, and then it is also a mitzvah to hear it as well, was so great, Annibale said, that sounding the shofar on the secular New Year was a way to be secretly Jewish. The midnight shofar is an example of how our traditions survived. When it was too dangerous to be openly Jewish, we attached Jewish traditions to existing Christian or secular holidays, once again, hiding in plain sight. So what about Passover? We can't call it Pesach, we have to say Pasqua, and we'll eat paniazimo, unleavened bread, and when you ask us why, we'll say per la Pasqua dei Ebrei, for the Easter of the Jews. But we will indeed celebrate the Seder Hamishi, and let's look at photo 14. And this is an example of the Seder Hamishi or the fifth night Seder. It is a Passover Seder that is held on an off night. Why? During the time of the Inquisition, brave Christian families offered a room in their home so that their Jewish neighbors could have Pesach far from the suspicious eyes of the Inquisition authorities, who were snooping around town on the first night of Passover, looking to trap crypto-Jews who were observing Pesach. So at great peril to themselves and their families, Christians made it possible for their Jewish neighbors to observe. And we have revived the Hamishi Seder as a tribute to the descendants of Christian families whose courage allowed our traditions to survive. And one of our Christian neighbors is, Joe, we're doing the hand washing, and to my right is his right, I should say, is his wife, who is Christian, and we invited her and her whole family to honor our Christian neighbors who allowed us to celebrate Passover. And by having a Seder Hamishi, we were able to maintain our traditions. They were not completely lost. And of all of the holidays, we're finding that I found over the years that the traditions of Pesach have remained. And I think it's because Christians put themselves out in a very, very dangerous way to allow us to have Passover in their homes. Well, what else? We'll put a red string over our baby's cribs, but we won't say that's a Jewish tradition from the Kabbalah. It's just too dangerous. Instead, we'll say to keep away the evil eye. When we break an egg into the bowl and we see a blood spot, we'll make sure to take it out, not because it's a kosher tradition, because it's just not healthy. And we won't eat dairy and meat in the same meal because fa male lo stomaco, it's not good for your digestion. And when dinner is over, we'll sweep the floor to the center of the room, never toward the door, out of respect for the mezuzah that was once there. No talit, no prayer shawls, no problem. We will take our profession of weaving and dyeing fabric and secretly make our own religious garment. And let's take a look at photo 15. This is weaver Marcia Leon. She has been weaving shawls, and she's on the right. She has been weaving shawls from the ginestra or the broom fiber for years, carrying on the tradition of her great-grandmothers. Marissa discovered her Jewish roots and is proud to tell visitors that no matter what she weaves, there is always a thread of blue visible in every piece. We put the blue thread, Marissa says, because it is so in the Bible. And this was the first time she ever had a talit wrapped around her shoulders. I'm wearing a talit that she made for me, and I brought my own so that she could try it on. And it was just overwhelmingly emotional for her. When I asked her why her shawls were not called sciarpe, the typical Italian name for shawl or scarf, Marissa said, these are very special. They are vancale. Vancale is a dialect word that means the embrace of God. And so it goes over decades, well, actually centuries. We took our Jewish traditions into our homes and into our hearts, and slowly, first for safety reasons and then for cultural reasons, the religious meanings of these rituals were lost, and our Jewish customs became family traditions, and sadly, nothing more. Let's take a look at photo 16 so that you can see exactly where I am from in the blue area there. This is the region of Calabria. This is the entire region. It is about the geographical size of the U.S. state of Virginia. In this blue area, prior to the Inquisitions, historians believe that 50% of the population was Jewish. And Dr. Sergio Della Pergola, who is an expert demographer and a friend of mine, posits that today there are approximately 50 million people in the Mediterranean region and in the countries that comprise South and Central America, 50 million whose backgrounds include lost Jewish roots. And let's meet some of those B'nai Anusim now. The first I'd like to introduce you to is Gianna Furci, whose ancestors made the journey that the historians describe. From Sicily to the ankle of the boot that you're looking at. And these are her words. I remember when I was a little girl and my great-grandmother was alive, we lived in Nicastro in the old city center. It was my grandmother, my biznonna, who told me that even though our family always went to church, we only went because we had to. But when there was a wedding, we had this tradition to make a blessing sotto la coperta, under the cloth. You see, one of the women, like my great-grandmother, would spend nearly a year crocheting a beautiful bedspread, big enough for the bride and groom's new double bed. But the first time anyone saw it was on the wedding day. And let's take a look at that chuppah on photo 17. Isn't that beautiful? And look at the blue sky shining through it. Gianna goes on. 4 men of the family would each take a corner and hold the coperta over the heads of the wedding couple. The 2 fathers would make a blessing in a secret language. Later on, when I came to the synagogue and heard Rabbi Barbara sing the wedding blessings, I recognized Chatan, groom, Kala, bride, Hebrew words. The blessings I heard as a child were in Hebrew, the language of the Jews. And now let me show you something I have here. If we can come back to me for a moment. I want you to be able to see this nice and here we go. Here we go. Take a look. It's a beaten up book, isn't it? Let me tell you about it. At first glance, it appears to be a Bible, and indeed that's what it is. It is, as a matter of fact. See if it says anything here that you can see. It is and the spine is gone. It's a Catholic Bible. It's printed in Italian. It is quite old, and as you can see, the spine is ripped away, and some of the pages are stuck together. They are actually victims of the humidity that plagues our mountain villages. But what is so special about this Catholic Bible is not what is inside it, but what's missing. My great aunt, Angela Scalise, sister of my grandmother, Margherita Scalise, was determined to keep Jewish traditions alive, which was nearly impossible to do, mainly because all vestiges of Judaism, not just the synagogues, but all the Judaica and the holy books, were destroyed by the Inquisition authorities centuries ago. Jewish traditions were lost, and as the centuries passed, it was more and more difficult, not only to pass along traditions, but worse, to even remember what those traditions were. But Zia Angela was determined. She knew that the Catholic Bible contained the 5 books of Moses, what was known in the mountains as La Bibbia Ebraica. And from somewhere she had heard that those same 5 books were called Torah. So this is what she did. And I'm holding it in my hands here for you to see. And I'm going to ask that we take a look now at photo 18. You see that? That's a bit. You can see it a little bit better than what I'm holding in my hand, but I'm actually holding the real one. So what did she do? Zia Angela took the Bible and carefully cut out Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and then she sewed them together to make what was for Zia the only example of a Torah that our family ever had. And with these stitched pages, Zia faithfully read the Torah stories to her grandchildren, story after story of Abramo, Sarah, Rachele, Jacobe, and with practically nothing at hand but needle and thread and determination, Zia Angela made her very own handmade Torah and single-handedly kept Jewish traditions alive. Another Bat Anusim, a daughter of ancestors forced to convert from Judaism, Angela Yael Amato, like me, discovered and embraced her Jewish roots. Angela is an accomplished violinist, was born in Napoli to parents with hidden Jewish heritage. She studied in London, married there, and is the mother to Alessandro, who became the very first bar mitzvah in our synagogue community. And we have his picture on number 19. There he is. Isn't he a darling boy? And there's the smiling mother. And this was in our synagogue in 2015. It was Angela, who's on the right there, who encouraged me to expand our program to include destination bar and bat mitzvah celebrations. So for 17 years, we have been welcoming Jewish and Jewish interfaith families to our synagogue so that their children can experience Jewish diversity here in our Italian mountains. One mother put it so well when she said, "Our son Tyler had no idea that there were places in the world where it's not easy to be Jewish, where our precious traditions have survived centuries of persecution." Tyler made an immediate comparison between New Jersey and Serrastretta. He said, "One synagogue in the mountains and people drive hours to come. It's so easy for us who have synagogues in every neighborhood to take it all for granted." Our congregants speak eloquently about perseverance and determination and testadura to continue to search for our lost traditions and then to highlight those traditions, especially for Italians who believe they have Jewish roots. In fact, my grandmother Felicia Scalise was determined to maintain the remnant of Jewish practice that was passed on to her by her parents, and that would be photo 20. This is my grandmother's mother. Saverio Scalise and Angela Rosa Grande, crypto-Jews who trace their Jewish heritage back to Toledo in Spain. It was great-grandfather Saverio who led Jewish prayer, and I often wondered, how did he do this? Maybe he knew 5 words of Hebrew, and he didn't hold the book upside down, so they gave him the job. But later on, I learned that he traveled by horse and cart and steamship from Naples to Montreal, Canada, 4 times in an 11-year period so that he could study with a Val di Davide Hasidic community and bring those traditions back here to Calabria. Felicia's mother, Angela Rosa Grande, she looks very long-suffering, doesn't she? She insisted that her daughter understand and appreciate their Jewish heritage, especially since so many of the Grande family had been judged as Judaizers and had their property confiscated by Inquisition authorities. Amazingly, the Grande family escaped persecution as they ran from the Inquisition, taking their traditions with them. And from their own stories, my own work began. I became an investigatore, searching for the Jews throughout their family stories. Gianna, Zia Angela, Attilio, Marisa, Angela, we are only a few of the many hundreds or maybe thousands of Calabrians and Southern Italians whose personal histories include remnants of Jewish family traditions. My father, Antonio Aiello of blessed memory, recalls the early days of his crypto-Jewish family. And let's look at photo 21. There's my dad, and those are his sisters, and that's his mother. That is the daughter of the great-grandparents you just saw. That is Felicia. She's 42 years old. Hard life here. My father's words. When I was a boy here in the village, the public school ended in the 3rd grade, but Mama was determined I should continue my education. She wanted me to know Torah, so she found an older gentleman to teach me. Unfortunately, he lived far down the mountain in Nicastro, but that did not deter my mother. She found a farmer who routinely made the trip to market on Mondays and Thursdays. So twice a week, I sat atop artichokes or potatoes or broccoli. Oh, how I wished for lettuce, while the farmer drove his load of produce in a horse-drawn cart to Timpone, the old Jewish quarter of Nicastro. He went to market. I went to study. I never knew my teacher's name. To me, he was maestro, and that was all. I think Jews were still afraid then of being found out. He taught me the Bible, but his Jewish stories were the ones I liked best, especially the one about how Italy got its name. And it goes like this. And then my father told a story that has been passed among Calabrians for centuries. It happened during the time of the Maccabees, the rebellion when the Jews faced heavy losses. The situation, I'm sure you know and you remember, was dire because the Maccabees needed more soldiers and they needed them quickly. And that's when the Jews formed scouting parties that sailed from Judea in search of mercenary soldiers to help their cause. And as their tiny craft drifted farther into the sea, the Jews aboard viewed the beautiful mist rising above miles of pristine Calabrian coastline. In Hebrew, they exclaimed, "Ai Talia!" Ai is the Hebrew word for island, which they thought the southern Italy was. Tal, T-A-L, is the Hebrew word for dew, and dew coming from like mist. And Yah is the contracted form of one of the names of God from Psalms 68 and other places in the Bible. Aitalia or Italia, which means the island of God's dew. There are historians today who believe that was once only a legend is actually true. It was the Jews who gave Italy its name. They liked what they saw and they stayed. They created communities, prospered as traders, and developed a rich cultural life that was neither Sephardi or Ashkenazi, but a Jewish cultural tradition that was so unique that it even had its own name, Italkit, a culture that began more than 1,600 years ago, remnants of which exist to this day. Here in Calabria and also in Sicily, there are so many families with deep, deep Jewish roots, as well as Italian Americans, Italian Canadians, families whose roots run deep in southern Italian soil, men and women who are longing to know who they are and who they were. So it has become my task to look beyond the superficial, to remember that being Jewish is less about names and noses and more about the soul of our people. And like all lost and isolated Jews, the Jews of Calabria and throughout South Italy represent a special and crucial opportunity. These are people who at first glance seem to be outside of what we assume as the normal or the usual Jewish experience. But my years in Calabria have taught me to listen not only to the historians who have now begun to acknowledge the strong Jewish presence that once stretched from the ankle to the toe along the Italian boot, but to also listen to the Calabrian people themselves who have clung to their ancestors' Jewish traditions, even when they weren't completely certain about the what or the why of their practice. But now we know. So the next time we Jews meet an Italian who says, you know, I've always felt close to the Jewish people. I've always felt a pull. I've always felt Jewish. You can reach out with an open hand and an open heart, and you can say, you may feel Jewish because long ago your Sicilian family or your Calabrian family may have been Jewish. There are ways to explore your heritage, ways to learn more about who you are and who you were. And around the world, there are organizations, synagogues, and individuals who will support you on your journey. Bentornata a casa. Welcome home. Thank you. Thank you. And what I would like to do right now, rather than take questions, is I would like to introduce Angele DiLiscia, who is going to speak about the Jews of Rhodes, the Greek and Italian connection.
This Rose not being
So you're here in a minute. Yeah. Just a minute. I gotta share screen. Let me get your slides up and let's see what I have to do for your stuff. Yeah, we'll figure that out in a minute. Let me get you set up and share that screen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. And I want to say how interesting it is because she was here so many years ago, and yet what you shared today was different.
And if you stand in front of that screen, or we
okay.
point it to you, people will see you.
We keep learning more and more
Yes.
as the years go on, finding more, meeting more people, listening to their stories. Mm-hmm.
And I also want to say how impressed I am with everything, all the work that you're doing, not only uncovering the history that you just shared with us, but still ministering to the Jews around the whole area. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so now it was fascinating to find out that we have this personal connection between the work that you're doing in the region and among our own membership. And it's a wonderful discovery for Angele to share her personal story of her husband And we only met him for a few years, unfortunately, before he passed away. But he was so moved to find us. And we fell in love with both of you immediately when you came. So now it's really, really so heartwarming for us to find out the whole story behind his background. So Angele, please come up and share your beautiful story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So the first picture is my late husband, a beautiful boy. Don't you think so? Also, Benny, the story of my late husband, Benny, Felice DiLiscia, and you see there the right writing of the name, was born. It is a story of many Jews.
Let's see if we can, the microphone's not
Oh,
on.
no,
So let's just see what we get. So
I didn't put it on.
I thought I did.
I thought so too.
Yeah, now it's off.
Is the battery low?
No, the battery.
It worked.
Hello? Just a moment. I might need Teddy.
Yeah, but it's not.
No, it's.
Oh, maybe the other one. Was it maybe the one that they used? Yeah, but it's not working.
Sound?
No.
No. Yeah, now.
Oh, yes.
We get close, it's working. Okay.
Oh, so I have to speak in this thing.
Yeah, keep it
Thinking
close.
of a nice stream.
Okay.
Okay, so Benny was born on the island of Rhodes, February 18, 1934. He was born in the Juderia across the Kahili Shalom synagogue. He was the youngest son of Luna Avzaradel, that you see in the next picture, and Luigi DiLiscia. They married after Luigi's conversion in 1921 in Rhodes. Luna was born in Antalya, Turkey. Her mom was born in Edirne, Ottoman Empire. The picture with Luna is important because she was featured in the novella Love and Death in Rhodes by Marcia Fine. Bob, can you give a
Yep.
second? Thank you. There it is. The novella Love and Death in Rhodes is based on the love story of Benny's mom and dad in Rhodes and Italy. It didn't turn out so well. She says, the romance of a girl starts as a fantasy and dissolves in something else. No more, no less. Luigi saved us, even though he didn't turn out to be the hero of my girlish dreams. She had a very hard life. It is the story, the novella is also the story of strong women. And the novella Love and Death in Rhodes, Marcia Fine, a friend of us, dedicated it to the relatives who did not return. Luna tells the stories and her dreams to Benny as a boy. The novella contains 3 books. The first one is Luna, about Luna and her love story, and the customs and the cuisine and everything that she knew in Rhodes. The second one is about Shabbatai Tzvi, the false messiah from 1600s, who had followers in Rhodes, even the son of the rabbi. They were really very worried when he became a Muslim. Yes, he had a choice, either become a Muslim or die. He chose a Muslim. Then the third book is fascinating of Love and Death in Rhodes. It's about Babata, a very wealthy woman. She was the lover of Bar Kokhba. Yes, the leader of the rebellion by the Jews of Judea against the Roman Empire. The rebellion took place of 132 to 136 CE. He was killed in 135. There's also a story of love and death. This is a map of Rhodes. Rhodes is an island in the southeast of the Aegean Sea. You see Rhodes in the southeast, down there.
I am,
When on a clear morning,
there we go.
you can see the coast of Turkey. Marmaris, okay, Marmaris. It is a beautiful island. It is. Rhodes always had links with Alexandria, who is 360 miles away, Athens, of course, 270 miles away, and Jerusalem. Rhodes was called the small Jerusalem. You will see with the synagogues why. Now, this beautiful island is also known for its Colossus of Rhodes. In fact, it's the sun god Helios, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was, you see in the middle, you see the Colossus? It was built in 280 BCE, symbolizing Rhodes' achievements in the arts and commerce. But it was destroyed 50 years later by an earthquake and never rebuilt, though they are plans now. The pieces were sold to a Syrian Jew in 773 CE. He needed 900 camels to take the pieces away. Now the cause is always depicted like you see straddling in the port, in the harbor. But now the archaeologists suggest, and many do, Professor Freud was also one of them, and he had a project to prove it, but it was not accepted by the Greeks. The Greeks are taking over all the archaeology projects now. They say that it was not a harbor, but in fact that it was part of the Acropolis of Monte Smith. Monte Smith is the mount where there are still remnants of the Acropolis, and that makes sense because they found the remnants of the foundry. They said it was nearly impossible to bring the pieces and put them together at the harbor. The Colossus was about the height of the Statue of Liberty in New York, in the fort. Picture 4. Picture 4 are 2 pictures that I took when we came back from a cruise in the Greek islands. From the top, I went to the top of the cruise line, and took those pictures. You see on the left, there are the fortification walls of the medieval town built by the Knights of St. John, who occupied Rhodes from 1309 to 1522, so for about 230 years, until the Ottoman Empire defeated them and occupied Rhodes Rhodes for 400 years. 400 years, from 1523 to 1912. The Juderia extends from the southeast angle of the port to the port for merchant vessels. They were confined in that area already by the Knights. Now, there probably were already Sephardim and Romanians, surely, when the Knights occupied Rhodes. Sephardim had fled Tarragona, Spain in 1280, and they went to Rhodes. Jews may have lived in Rhodes also in antiquity, but it's not proven. But there is a reference in the first book of the Maccabees about Rhodes and the alliance with Jerusalem and Rome. It's paragraph 15, line 22, if you want. You know that the Maccabees is not part of the Torah. Now, the island of Rhodes has been the target of many battles and wars over the centuries because of its maritime military position. You occupied Rhodes and you had the whole Mediterranean, the east parts that came with it. Did you find? This is another picture. It's the entrance of the house where Benny lived on the street of the Candidat Shalom. The name is Kahal Kadosh Shalom, Holy Congregation of Peace. He was born and lived in the Juderia, in Tosiadu and Simini Street. Benny and his family lived there with their Baba, meaning grandma. Her name was Clara, but everybody called her Caden. Her family name was Capuano. She was born in 1860 in Vilna during the Ottoman Empire, and she said that they were well treated. Benny never knew his maternal grandpa, Isaac-Avzaradel. He was murdered by his business partner in Cuba in 1902. What did he do there? Well, his grandpa was a kind of a trader. He was all over the Arabia. He would bring things from Rhodes to there. How he ended up in Cuba, I tried to find it out, see them with Temple Moses in Miami, where there are a lot of Cuban, but I haven't found anything. But then he vividly remembered that his mother read a letter saying that the grandfather, Isaac-Avzaradel, was missing. And from, I don't know how they heard it, but they said that he was murdered by his business partner. Now, there's Baba and Isaac-Avzaradel, they had, I think, 5 children. Their son Bahor was his wife, Bahora, and his youngest daughter, Renata, were murdered in Auschwitz. The other daughters, one died in Rhodes before the war. They escaped the Nazis by immigrating to South Africa, Cape Town, where a part of the family is still living now. I'm in touch with them. They went to Congo and some went to Israel. Picture 6. This on the left is, I'm sorry, I'm dyslexic. The picture is Danny and his mom in 1952 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, New York. Danny and his elder brother Michael immigrated to the USA after spending post-war years in Italian refugee camps in Averso, in Pagnoli, and others. They lived, the 2 brothers lived where their aunt, Flora Tarica, who is the youngest sister of Luna. Now Luna would visit them. Luna immigrated later and lived in Burbank, California. She died there in 1973 as a US citizen. Pictures. The next one is Benny. It is when he was a successful businessman. He worked in many international businesses. He did twice the tour of the world. He flew with the Concorde. I still have the menu. Isn't it gorgeous? Picture 7. This is 2014. We were in Rhodes for the 70th anniversary of the deportation of the Jews of Rhodes, Kos, and Leros. Benny testified as a first-hand witness of the Holocaust in Rhodes. This was a project of Professor Richard Freud from the Harvard University. This is a screenshot of his book, The Archaeology of the Holocaust, Vilna, Rhodes, and Escape Tunnels, published in 2019. Professor Freud passed away 2 months after that, last year. Now, Benny's family, his mom, his brother, his sister, survived the Holocaust. When the racial laws were enacted in Rhodes in 1938, Luigi, who had been the secretary of the governor Marco Lapo, who was kind to the Italians, but the one who enacted the laws, the racial laws, was a Nazi. They hated it. Now, on a certain Sunday morning, the whole family, Luigi told his whole family they had to dress up, and they would took them all to an unknown place. They were all baptized in a Catholic church against their will. In fact, they became crypto Jews. But the beating and the fighting with the kids, especially the Greeks, because everybody knew they were Jews. Then he didn't forgive his dad for his betrayal. Until Professor Freud insisted that his dad saved their lives, but at what cost? On the right, you see the memorial of the martyrs of the Holocaust. Now, as a 11-year-old boy, Benny saw everything that happened in Rhodes. On the fateful day when the Jews were rounded up, July 18, the last to July 20, 1944. He saw his aunts, his uncles, his cousins dragged to the Italian air base quarters, the Aeronautica, and he heard later of the longest journey to Auschwitz. One of his aunts passed a little black pocket pouch to his mom because they were watching alongside when they did the trek to the Aeronautica. She kept it and she came back and she returned what she had given her. It was a gold. The trek from the Aeronautica, where the Jews were taken from that building to the ports, to start their journey to Auschwitz, first to Rhodes, then to the camp in Hungary, and then to Auschwitz. The Germans wanted the streets empty. The Jews they could not see a last time their families, because they gave the alarm for the bombings. So everybody had to stay inside. I want to mention the role of Kurt Waldheim. He was Secretary General of the UN from 1972 to 1980 and President of Austria in 1985. He signed off an order to military commanders to round up the Jews of Rhodes. He was declared persona non grata by the USA during his presidency, but the CIA had been aware of his wartime past since 1945. I see. Go back. Now, picture 7 was a memorial that I mentioned. That's okay. It's written in 6 languages. The memorial was vandalized since it was erected in 2002. Now, since 2014, every 5 years, there is and will be the commemoration of the anniversary of the deportation and destruction of the Jewish community of Rhodes, Kos, and Lagos. The first one was in 2014. 2019, Sarah Alhadeff was there. So the next will be 2024. The picture there is the Kahal Kadosh synagogue, the Shalom. This is a picture that Professor Freud, that you see in the picture, standard in 2015. He was doing his radar penetrating technique to the mikveh, and he was also trying to find out why there are 2 arcs. Normally, you have 1 arc. Look at your synagogue, please. The temple of the little temple, like the Kahila, we call it, was in fact built on the model of the temples in Jerusalem. They also had 2 arcs. Why? There were the Jerusalem temples apparently had that. Now, this synagogue, the Kehillah, is the oldest Jewish synagogue in Rhodes, in Greece. It was built in 1577. There are services from June to October, mostly attended by tourists and descendants of the Rhodes. There is also a museum that's really worthwhile visiting. There are a lot of artifacts that the Rhodes gave to Aaron Hassan, a lawyer in LA. He is the one who really collected the money and who restored the Kahal synagogue, who restored the museum, who did all the work in the cemetery. I have to tell you, the old cemetery was not where the actual one is now when you visit Rhodes. It was that Drutuna Debeki who obliged the Jews to move their beloved ones who were buried in the old cemetery to a cemetery outside of the old city and on the way to yeah. And some of the most beautiful he kept to build his own palace, what they called his palace. Yeah, can I have the 9? The other synagogue It's a picture I took when we visited one of our visits. It's Benny looking at the Kahal Kadosh Gadol, or the Holy Great Congregation, also the Kahal Grande. Was built in 1480s, but destroyed in 1945 during British bombing raids. Benny was an 11-year-old witness of the destruction and saw how the Greeks were taking the woods to burn in their fireplaces. He ran to the policia, to the police, to the British Army, but nobody intervened. This was another excavation site of Professor Freud, was partially funded by the Avzaradel project. He knew what the Gadol looked like as a boy when he was a young boy living in Rhodes. This is the victims and survivors of the Holocaust in Rhodes. I start with the top left. That is the commemorative plaque on the wall of the Aeronautica building, where the long track to Auschwitz started. About 1600, other number is 1700, depends which books you are reading. Men, women, children, and elderly were deported. They left on July 23rd, 1944, and arrived in Auschwitz, August 16, 1944. 25 days in terrible conditions. More than 1,200, others say 1,900, were sent immediately to the gas chambers. If Benny was not saved by his dad, he was one of them, with his father. Now, the remaining deportees were tattooed, A for women with a number, B for men with a number, and sent to forced labor. The women were raped, sterilized, and used in inhuman experiments. Dr. Remember. Now, on the right, Benny is going through the list of the victims. He knew so many of them. Only 151 Jews, some say the more, some say the less, survived the Nazi camps. Serrastretta, that you probably all know, was one of them. Most went first to Italy, mainly Bologna, where they were treated. And of the 151, they say about 1/5 died. There was factors that had a lot of sickness. They did not return to Rhodes. They wanted to forget what happened there. It was too painful. Later, they immigrated to other parts of the world to join the diaspora. Or do you say diaspora?
Diaspora.
Yeah.
Diaspora.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I have to mention the picture of Selahattin Ulkumen. He was the Turkish consul in Rhodes. He died in 2003. He is honored by the Yad Vashem, which means a memorial and a name, Israel's official memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. The Turkish consul saved, some say 42, others say up to 50 Jews who were of Turkish nationality, Turkish descent, who had a link. He tried to find as many as he could. I think that your family was saved. So,
My parents. My
Yeah.
parents.
Salah also, they were saved. Unfortunately, the Nazis took their revenge on the consul. Many witnessed the bombings of the Turkish consulates. The pregnant wife of the consul was gravely wounded. Benny told me that she gave birth after she was wounded. We go through, because I find in books that she had already a son. No, Benny said she gave birth after she was wounded.
My son,
I know.
good friends with his grandson, and you know the rest.
So, but in books I see, okay. So anyway, she gave birth to the son Mehmet, and she died some days later. So the Nazis really took their revenge. It's a sad story. It should be done. Here we are in Rome. This is the great temple of Rome in the old Roman ghetto, or facing the old ghetto. We visited Rhodes and Italy a last time together in September 2018. This is the Tempio Maggiore di Roma. It was built in 1904 in an eclectic Art Nouveau style. It is a beautiful inside. It's really beautiful. It's alongside the Tiber, facing the ghetto with the kosher restaurants. Now, the Jewish, like the Rabbi Barbara Aiello said, the Jewish community of Rhodes goes back to the 2nd century BC. Many came from Judea. Later, large numbers of Jews were brought to Rome as slaves. If you know Rome, you know the Ark of Titus, you see the Jewish slaves there. Now, the Tempio also houses a museum, the Museo Ebraico di Roma. We saw when we were there, and you see, if you can read it, Italiani della Ebraica means the Hebrews, the Jews of the Hebrew race, and that I cannot read from here, but in fact it was the so Italiani della Ebraica and the racial laws of 1938. Then he remembered, though he was only 4 years old, but he remembered the racial laws of 1938. It was the year he was forcefully baptized, and it was the year his little heart was broken. He lost his little girlfriend, Matti. Matti was a neighbor, and they played always together. Matti is the daughter of Rebecca Amato Lefini, the author of I Remember Rhodes. Later then he learned that family left for 10 years. All Jews who had come to Rhodes after January 1919 had to leave Rhodes by March 12, 1939. There were about 500 Jews who were in that group. Mostly came from Asia Minor, so Turkey, Greece, and Bulgaria. Then there was a discussion that it was illegal, they couldn't do that, and it was extended, the decree was extended to April 15, 1939, so from March to April. Now, the Alliance Universelle intervened, and then obtained the annulation. It was illegal, but the brutal Nazi, Becky, he had his own plan. He gave a very ambiguous statement that it was not annullated, but it was suspended. So those Jews became very fearful. They didn't know what to do, what to think. And most of them lived Rhodes, for Naples, Tangiers, and Palestine. So there were another group of Jews that left Rhodes. This is also in September 2018. We were in Trastevere in the restaurant La Caleta to meet the big Italian family. All the ladies you see are all Jewish, daughters, granddaughters of Jewish royalty. The men are not. They are Italian and they saved those Jewish women. There is a story that Benny told me I have to tell you. It's a really love story. One of the sisters of his mother had an Italian soldier, the Navy guy, as lover. He had to leave. The war was over, but who showed up? Her lover. And he took her to Italy. Yes, it's worthwhile. Yes. And I know other stories like that. They didn't forget. In many times in books, when the travelers in the past traveled through Rhodes, they said that the Jews of Rhodes were the most beautiful women they saw. So something worked out. So I'm still in contact with many of the Jews of the family. Then the pictures continue. On the left, that is our wedding picture. We married April 21, 1997. We postponed our wedding for the day because April the 20th, what we first had thought was Hitler's birthday. We were not going to marry. Also, now, I met Benny on a blind date.
Oh my
There was a colleague of mine who I was devoted to 27 years. I was doctoral without borders. I was in Africa. I had my life. I didn't need. First marriage was a big disaster, and I said never again. He had said the thing. So my colleague and a physician, a neurosurgeon, she said, Angele, I found somebody. I said, and please leave me alone. She said, Angele, please, the last time. Can you go with you? I said, okay, the last time. Okay. Then he told we were saved the best of the last. So we phoned. I didn't want a doctor. I didn't want a Belgian. I wanted something southern. I heard his accent, he heard mine. And then I said, you are Italian American? Yes, he said. So we spoke for an hour and a half. The next day, we came to visit, he lived in Danskaat, it's north of Antwerp. We came to Wemmel, hiding behind a big bouquet of flowers. He didn't know what to expect because he said, oh, I didn't know how you were because your voice, I imagined a tall, strong woman. When that petite opened the door, it was a surprise. But we fell in love. It was love at first sight, and we never could. We were always together. Now, Benny never told anyone that he was Jewish. After some weeks, when I met him, I said, Benny, why don't you tell me you were Jewish? How do you know? If I felt it. I thought an explanation. And so, but it took me years before he started telling me everything that happened all the trials. Now, He was haunted by all the traumas of baptism, the Nazi occupation, the Holocaust, and the anti-Semitic actions that there were many times victims of. He suffered from untreated PTSD his whole life. He had terrible nightmares, and it was always the same. Two black men were standing over him when he was sleeping, trying to get him out and kidnap him. Now, he was fighting with arms and legs, and I got the keys if I couldn't escape. He also was sleepwalking. He always wanted to go through the walls, to the doors, the glass sliding doors. I took him even to a psychiatrist because I thought maybe he would help. Then he didn't want to say a word, so I was a messenger. After telling him the story, Dr. Epstein said, he can join our group. We have a group for Holocaust survivors. Now, I knew that he never wanted to talk about that. And I knew it wasn't yet. He never wanted to join. So Dr. Epstein said, Doc, continue what you are doing. You are the only one he trusts and you would talk to. And I did this till the last day. Now, the last picture is Florida 2015. That was the year when I saw the first symptoms of dementia. Later confirmed it was Lewy body dementia. His elder sister also passed away, I haven't seen. Anybody knows epigenetics? Yeah, right. Now, but it was also the year that I told Danny, I'm looking, there must be a Sephardi something here. So when I started Googling, and what did I find? The Sephardi Federation of Palm Beach County. I emailed Miriam, Miriam told me back, and we immediately became members of the Sephardi Federation. That were the best moments for Benny. At last, he was among Sephardim that he could trust. He heard and they spoke his beloved mother tongue, Judeo-Espanol. His grandma spoke Turkish when they were not allowed to hear it. He learned Turkish. The mother spoke Ladino, then he picked it all up. The father spoke Italian. It was a pure bubble in that house. He spoke at least 6 or 7 languages. Now, unfortunately, then he passed away July 11, 2021. But they had said in 2015 at FAU that he had 2 years to live because the Lewy body dementia was much more advanced. But he was so fluid, so in languages that he could hide a lot. But when he had to pass the test, he could not even roll a clock with 3 in the afternoon. So it was much work. We didn't know golf clubs. Nobody knew that he had dementia because we were always together. I anticipated what was going to happen so that he did not come to us. And they thought he passed away of a heart attack because it was so sudden. Now, I want to end this sad story of the Holocaust with a symbol of the rebirth of the Jewish people. The armistice between Israel and her Arab enemies following Israel's War of Independence, 14 May 1948, was signed in Rhodes. The few Jews who still lived in the city were profoundly affected. that the state of Israel signed its first armistice in a place where Jewish life had been almost totally wiped out is symbolic of the experiences of Jewish history. Out of the ashes, new life arose. That's it.
Give it to Rhodes.
Thank you so much.
I had much more, but I had to.
And I really recommend that you get the book. You can easily, you can download. You can go and look it up on Amazon and you can download it on Kindle. Yes, it's a wonderful, wonderful story. How it back and forth between she gets her Italian lover to convert to Judaism, but then he has them all baptized.
And Turkish.
Right, and so, thank you so much, Angele. Thank you, Rabbi. Does anybody have any questions for the rabbi? Any questions for?
I know.
Yes, please.
Get the mic to her.
How do the
Close her DM out.
authorities have such power in iniquity?
What is the question?
She wants to know how the Inquisition had power in Italy.
King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who were the monarchs of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which comprised Spain, Portugal, Sicily, the island of Sardinia, and the mainland of Italy from the toe up to Napoli, up to Naples. So they were controlling all of that area, and as they were persecuting Jews, the Jews were running, if you will, from within the borders of the same country. And so when the expulsion was enacted and the Inquisition began, it was technically all of the same country. And so if you can imagine Jews running from Spain to Portugal, and then they're being persecuted, they're running to Sicily, and then they're being persecuted, they're running to the mainland of Italy, the numbers kept increasing. They kept increasing. So by the time they arrived in Italy in 1520, about then, that was where the majority of the Jews were, because those were the survivors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Was it true that the Jewish people we were speaking of gave Italy its name? I was confused by what you were saying about the name Italy. The connection between that and the Jewish people.
Yeah, you can repeat the Hebrew translation.
The Hebrew translation is Ai Talia. Ai is the Hebrew word for island. Tal, T-A-L, is the Hebrew word for dew, D-E-W, like mist. And Yah is one of the names of God, a contracted form, and one of the early ones found in Psalm 68 and other places. And so these Jews who came looking for mercenary soldiers exclaimed as they saw this beautiful mist rising from the toe of the boot, something they had never seen coming from a hot, dry desert climate. They exclaimed, Ai Talia, the island of God's dew. And that's how Italy got its name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a great story.
It was it was a legend for a long time, but then the now looking at some of the ancient maps, the L, of course, the Lamed looks like an L, but the way that the Lamed was configured back in the day, the historians now believe this to be true. This was a story that my father heard my father was born in 1911, so this was in 1920, something like that, when he heard that story.
We have another question. Hi.
Okay.
It was really fascinating. You mentioned somebody with a last name Amato. Is that also a Jewish name?
Tell me the name again. Can someone please tell me that more clearly?
Amato.
Amato. Oh my! I'm so glad you brought that up, because Angela, the mother of the bar mitzvah boy, is Angela Amato. Amato is the name of the closest river to us here in the mountains, and the village of Amato was settled by Jewish people. It is there are a few names, a few surnames that are very well known, having a Jewish heritage: Russo, Rossi, Amato, Aiello, Scalise. These are surnames that are very recognizable as Jewish here in the South. Now, we do a lot of surname research. We do not do a bloodline, because the three of us who run the cultural center, we are not genealogists, but we do research surnames to see if we can trace them back to Spain. And why would that be important? Because back in the time of the Inquisition, your wealth was tied up in your palazzo, in your house. And if many of you have experience in the Mediterranean area, and you know that a family will build a house, and then the children grow up and they build onto the house, and then those children have children and they build onto the house. So nobody left, nobody moved, because that was what your il bene, that was your wealth, and your property was tied up into the house. So when people left, they left for a good reason. And so we trace the migration. Not only do we trace the origin of the surname, but we trace the migration of the surname as well.
Rabbi, have you ever come across the name Fantamura?
Tell me that please say that a little more clearly for me.
Fantamura.
Plantamura.
Plantam, Plan, Plantamura.
Fanta, P-L-A-N-T-A, Fantamura. Have you ever come across that name?
No, I haven't, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We use Inquisition records, and when and many times it's a real labor of love, because a lot of times they're not in alphabetical order, and some of the writing is old Latin or dialect. That's why we have two other people who are native to this area who work with me. And actually, they do the digging and they do the translation, and I put the reports together for our clients. And so just because I haven't heard that name doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We have mountains of primary and secondary sources that we check. You can always write me a note. As a matter of fact, my website is rabbibarbara.com, very simple, and my email address is there. And if you have a name that you'd like me to take a look to give you some information about it, I can do that for you.
We have one more question.
Okay.
Now, if I understand you correctly, I think you said that at one time the Jewish population of Calabria might have been as high as 50%. I wonder also about neighboring Sicily. We had visited there after we went to a mission there. And we were told that the population is
I'm not getting all of that. I'm just wondering if you can come a little closer to the computer mic. It was a kind of a long question there, and I didn't hear what you were asking about Sicily. Can Robert? Can you?
Yeah, the question is, what was the percentage of the population in Sicily Jewish? What percentage of it was Jewish?
even more so than 50%. There was a time in Sicily, a 300-year period, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews all lived together in peace. And so they of course they made families, they lived there, they were not being persecuted, and so the populations grew. And one of the reasons that it was so successful is that whenever there was a dispute, your dispute was adjudicated through your religious affiliation. The bishops handled the Catholics, the Beit Din handled the Jews, and the imams handled the Muslims. And especially along the coasts, there were no shtetls and no ghettos in the south of Italy. When I showed you Timpone, it was a Jewish quarter in that translation of the plaque, not a ghetto, because the Jews were never locked in. And as a result, there was a lot more freedom of movement and a lot more mixing culturally between and among different ethnic groups. And in some there here in Calabria, we know of about, not too many, maybe I'd say fewer than 10 villages that were founded by Jewish families, but in Sicily there are dozens and dozens. So the percentage of Jews in Sicily is even greater. And also part of Sicily, if you've been there, especially when you get toward the southern part, toward Agrigento and Ragusa and places like that, very, very remote, very difficult to find and get to. So a lot of Jews survived because the Inquisition just didn't have either the wherewithal or the time or the money to chase them.
Any other questions? Yes.
To follow up on that last one, what time period was that in Sicily when the three groups worked in harmony?
The time period when
late 13 and 1400s.
the same as in Iberian.
Yeah. Can I share one more thing with you,
Yes,
or shall we
please.
go? Okay. Many of you, I'm sure you know the melody Bendigamos, and it's very close to my heart because, of course, it is a Ladino melody, or Judeo-Spanish, as we say now. And we sang it around our dining table at the conclusion of our Shabbat meal. It was the only vestige of the Birkat Hamazon, of the grace after meals, that my family ever knew. And the words, of course, are from Psalm 118. It is a psalm of gratitude and hope. And the translation is, "Blessed is the one most high, the eternal one who created us. Let us give thanks for all the good things we have been given. Praise be the eternal one's holy name for the mercy and compassion we receive. Blessed is the eternal one, filled with goodness and with compassion that endures forever." And so I'd like to sing Bendigamos for you in honor of Luna, of Angeline's mother-in-law, who spoke Ladino. And as I said earlier, my parents spoke Ladino to each other only when they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about. So my vocabulary was only sex and money for many years. But there's a lot of Hebrew words and a lot of Ladino here in these mountains, and I've learned a lot just by being asking questions and doing a lot of listening. Bendigamos al Altísimo, al Señor que nos creó. Démosle agradecimiento por los bienes que nos dio. Alabado sea su santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado. Odula Adonai Kitov Kile Olam Hasto, alabado sea santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado. Odula Adonai Kitov Kile Olam Hasdo. It's been my honor to be with you, to be in your presence today. Thank you so very, very much. And let's give Angele also a hand. What a beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. And if you come to Italy, come to see me.
See you in June.
Pardon me?
See you in June.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
if you
right.
Caught it. Not only was there a connection, but she's going to be officiating at that bat mitzvah.
I think I'm officiating at the boy in the afternoon. I'm not quite sure, but I will see you all. I will be there. Yeah, I will see you anywhere. We have two that day, and I'm not exactly sure who I'm doing. So,
And please, everyone, join us. We're going into the other room just for some, dessert.
See if
Thank you.
anyone
you're having some
Rhodes?
Italian treats. Oh, how nice! I
Ask if
wish I
anyone
were
has
with you.
questions for Angele.